Good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to see you again this evening.
It's great to be here.
It is nice to get together. What are we going to talk about tonight?
We have got, boy, do we have a show in store for them this evening.
Is it exciting?
It is exciting. We are going to be discussing Proverbs chapters 2 through 5.
Didn't we do that last week?
We gave an introduction last week.
Oh, we're going to go back and cover every word this week.
We are. Boy, howdy.
We could keep going back and we understand we don't want to overburden them, but we could sure spend a lot of time on any part of Proverbs, any part of the Bible we could. But we'll try to find a happy medium.
Well, if you leave anything out, you left out something good.
That's true.
We're trying not to leave out any good stuff.
That's absolutely true. So we'll just begin with Proverbs chapter 2.
All right.
And what I want to do in that chapter is just divide it up by conjunctions. If, then, so forth, and just see what it can tell us if we break it down that way, because if it says do this and then there's a consequence, we need to see how those things relate to each other.
Agreed.
It begins in the first 4 verses of Proverbs chapter 2 with some if statements. It says, "My son, if you will receive my sayings," and the if is there even if it's not there, "and if you treasure my commandments within you, and if you make your ear attentive to wisdom, and if you incline your heart to understanding, for if you cry for discernment, if you lift your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver, and if you search for her as for hidden treasures." Every one of those little phrases there has an implied if right before it. It lists all these things in those verses, that if you do these things, if you receive my sayings, if you treasure the commandments within you. And that word treasure has to do with something that's hidden. Mm-hmm. In England, especially with their metal detectorists, they have the law is that if you find a hidden treasure, it's divided between the person who found it and the landowner. Okay. And then they report that to the government, and then the government can be involved. The museums can be involved if they want to buy it. That's an incentive for people to go out and look for stuff. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of buried treasure in England. And then you go to a place like Italy, where practically every square foot is an archaeological site. There's a lot of buried treasure around this world. Mm-hmm. And we dream of a pirate treasure, going to an island, and you dig up that pirate treasure. And that's what that word treasure there implies, something that's been hidden, something of value that's been hidden. What people would do is if there was an invading army, they would bury their treasure. And some of them came back and got it, and some of them didn't come back and get it. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of treasure. So that's what it's saying here. Treasure the commandments within you. And if your ear is attentive to wisdom and your heart is inclined to understanding, if you cry for discernment, if you lift up your voice for understanding, and you seek her for silver. And then notice it says, if you search as for hidden treasures. That's the attitude we need to have toward wisdom and these sayings and all those things. If, then, in verse 5, then you will discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. So if you do those things, then you will be able to discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. Then it says for, which means because, in verses 6 through 8. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice, and he preserves the way of his godly ones. And so the consequence, the reason why, is because the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He's the one who stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity. He guards the paths of justice, and he preserves the way of his godly ones. There's another then in verse 9. Then you will discern righteousness and justice and equity and every good course. And in that short verse, it says, then you will discern righteousness, you will discern justice, you will discern equity, you will discern every good course. And another 4 in the next 2 verses. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will guard you, understanding will watch over you. For wisdom will enter your heart, knowledge will be pleasant to your soul, discretion will guard you, and understanding will watch over you. To the result of that, something will happen, and in this case it is that you will be delivered. And again, that word deliver really continues throughout the whole verse, although it only occurs a couple of times. It's implied in every little phrase in there. to deliver you from the way of evil, to deliver you from the man who speaks perverse things, from those who leave the paths of uprightness, to walk in the way of darkness, who delight in doing evil, and rejoice in the perversity of evil, whose paths are crooked, and who are devious in their ways, to deliver you from the strange woman, from the adulteress who flatters with her words, that leaves the companion of her youth, and forgets the covenant of her God. All of these delivers are just in those few verses. He delivers us from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things, from those who leave the paths of uprightness to walk in darkness, from those who delight in evil, from those who rejoice in the perversity of evil, from those whose paths are crooked, and from those who are devious in their ways, from the strange woman, the adulteress who flatters with her tongue, from the one who leaves the companion of her youth, and from the one who forgets the covenant with her God. All those things it does for us if we will just do all those things that it said earlier for wisdom. Because, or for, her house sinks down to death, and her tracks lead to the dead. None who go to her return again, nor do they reach the paths of light. Her house sinks down to death, her tracks lead to the dead. None who go with her is coming back. It's a point of no return. You go with her, you don't come back. And none of them who go with her reaches the right path, the path of light, because you're headed the wrong direction. So, in verse 20, so you will walk in the way of good men, and keep to the paths of the righteous. And so that's what we'll do. We need to walk in the way of good men, and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it. And so that's the reason. The upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the treacherous will be uprooted from it. So that verse points out that the wicked is going to be cut off, and the treacherous will be uprooted. I think you're going to take a look at Proverbs chapter 3 for us and see what we can get out of that chapter.
That's right. Proverbs chapter 3 can be divided kind of into three sections. Two of those my son sections that we talked about last week. Mm-hmm. And then sandwiched in between them is kind of a section where wisdom is, the benefits of wisdom are extolled. And so we'll look at each of those three sections of Proverbs chapter 3. The first section is Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. And it is one of those my son instructions. And it's an alternating series of positive and negative admonitions. There's things to do and things not to do. Mm-hmm. And then a result of having either done or not done those things. Mm-hmm. So we look at the first section of that, the first couple of verses 1 and 2. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments, for length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. So when we look at that, there's a negative instruction, do not forget my teaching. And there's a positive instruction, let your heart keep my commandments. And the result of that then is length of days, years of life, and peace. So we're going to follow that structure all the way down through these first 12 verses. Verses 3 and 4, do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. So there again, we have, it starts with a negative instruction. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. And then it moves right to a positive instruction. Bind them around your neck. Write them on your heart. And you can see the relationship between the negatives mm-hmm. and the positives in each one of these mm-hmm. sections. There's a negative way of saying the admonition, and then it tells us the positive aspect of that, or what we should do instead. And then the result is the favor and good repute in the sight of, that you will have favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. So follow that structure on down through verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. And this is probably a familiar passage, a couple of verses to most people. Most people have heard that or would remember it. This one switches the order. It starts with the positive. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And then it has a negative. Do not lean on your own understanding. And then it has another positive. In all your ways acknowledge him. So there's that structure there of positive and negative kind of interacting with one another. And then the result in that one is that he will make your path straight. Follow that structure then through verses 7 and 8. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be a healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. So there it switches back again in order. Now it's negative and positive. Do not be wise in your own eyes is the negative. Positive, fear the Lord and turn from evil. And the result then is healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. That sounds good, by the way. Mm-hmm, healing to your body and refreshment to your bones after a long day of work or a difficult illness. Mm-hmm. Verses 9 and 10 switches the structure a little bit here in the last couple. Verses 9 and 10 says, "Honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce, so your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine." And so with this one, there's just a positive admonition to honor the Lord from your wealth and the first of all your produce. Think of God first. Put him first in these things. And the result will be that he will bless you. He'll continue to bless you with what he has given you in the past, if you remember to honor him with what you've been given up to that point. Mm-hmm. And then verses 11 and 12, I think, brings us kind of to the conclusion, but also maybe to the main point that the father is trying to instruct his son, because he starts this, he begins and ends the section with a "my son" statement. And here he says, "my son." And if you've ever given your kids a list of instructions, and you start off and you have their attention with the first one because you just got their attention and now they're listening, and then you give them 3 or 4 or 5 things to do to remember, what happens to the kid's mind? It starts to wander.
Yeah, they're gone.
And so their mind starts to wander, and they begin to kind of zone out a little bit. And then you get to one on the list that this is an important one. What do? You get their attention once again, and you really let them know this is what you want to pay attention to. So with verse 11 and 12, it starts off again with that "my son." He gets his attention. And he says, "My son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord, or loathe his reproof. For whom the Lord loves, he reproves, even as a father, the son in whom he delights." And so the interesting thing here is we just had a section that had only a positive. Now we have that final concluding section. There's only a negative in the form of "do not reject the discipline of the Lord," and "do not reject his reproof." And the result is that we'll understand that God loves us, just like we understand that our parents love us. Maybe not in the moment when you're a young child do you understand that discipline comes from a place of love. But as you get older, and this is what we're thinking about with the Proverbs and these "my son" statements, is that these are instructions to a son who's coming of age and ready to begin taking on responsibility. And at that age, when you can begin to understand those things, it becomes clear to you that your parents' discipline is based in love. And so here the father is reminding him, perhaps, maybe even calling to mind specific instances in the past when the father has reproved his son, and can call on those experiences and say, I disciplined you because I loved you. And here's what we learn from that. God disciplines us. He loves us enough to discipline us.
I might mention just one thing here, is that you mentioned just a while ago this passage will sound familiar. Mm-hmm. We've resisted the temptation to jump into some New Testament passages where these show up again,
right?
Because we could go a long ways. We could, whom the Lord loves, he reproves, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
We could jump to the New Testament. We've resisted that temptation. I just wanted to let everybody know that with great effort, we resisted that temptation.
We can shorten it a little bit. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
That's good. We really we'll save that for next week when we take this introduction to these 4 chapters and we broke it down to one chapter at a time.
Yeah.
No, maybe not.
No.
All right, so that is the first section of chapter 3. The second section then is an interlude in praise of wisdom, verses 13 through 20 is that whole section. And then we look at kind of the setup to that. Verses 13 through 18 says, "How blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. For its profit is better than the profit of silver, and its gain than fine gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. Long life is in her hand, and in her hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who hold her fast." So here we have this, at the beginning of this, we have a setup. We have in verse 13, "How blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding." So it's really a beatitude. How blessed, how happy is the person who does these things. What blessings are there, though? What does that mean? What happiness will they find? It's better than silver or gold, more precious than jewels. It's better than a long life. It includes riches and honor. It includes pleasantness and peace, life and happiness. All of those are the things that are wrapped up in that idea of being blessed by finding wisdom. Mm-hmm. And then we have at the conclusion of that section, verses 19 and 20, "The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the deeps were broken up, and the skies drip with dew." And it's very important for us to understand the connection between wisdom and creation in the first 9 chapters of Proverbs. And this is just one of those little nuggets or statements that gives us that that insight into the way God established the structure, the fabric, the being of our universe. God engaged wisdom in creation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's only by wisdom that creation can make any sense to us.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't employ the same wisdom to understand creation that God used in creating our world, then our world becomes out of order. It becomes chaotic. It becomes uneasy or unable to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that we really want to do is focus on wisdom, because that's what God used to create the world as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
So then the final section of Proverbs chapter 3 is verses 21 through 35, and it has another "my son" instruction. And verses 21 through 26 gives the benefits of living according to wisdom. My son, let them not depart from your sight. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, so they will be life to your soul and adornment to your neck. Then you will walk in your way securely. Your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Do not be afraid of sudden fear, nor of the onslaught of the wicked when it comes. For the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. So the benefits of living according to wisdom, just some of the things that are mentioned there: security, not stumbling, no fear of the dark, sweet sleep. I really like that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure most people have experienced various times in their lives when their sleep was not sweet, when it fled from them, or it was hard to come by because of turmoil or distress in life.
Mm-hmm.
But when we live according to the principles of wisdom, it makes for sweet sleep, and I like that one. No fear of evil, and God will protect you. Those are some of the benefits of living according to the instructions of wisdom. And then verses 27 through 31, there are 5 negative imperatives, 5 imperative statements of, and if you remember back to English class, an imperative is usually a statement that commands you to do something, and the you is implied. The subject of the sentence is implied. So you could say, you do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will get it, when you have it with you. Do not devise harm against your neighbor while he lives in security beside you. Do not contend with a man without cause, if he has done you no harm. And do not envy a man of violence, and do not choose any of his ways. These really are all about our interactions with people around us. And the instruction here is for us to take care of ourselves, take care of our own actions, to take care of our own behavior. I don't have any control over my neighbor's behavior. And it's my behavior, or my neighbor is not my responsibility to police his behavior and to enforce consequences upon him if he misbehaves in some way. And we have that idea kind of solidified for us in the final verses of the chapter, in verses 32 to 35, when it says, "For the crooked man is an abomination to the Lord, but he is intimate with the upright." That is, God is intimate with the upright. "The curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked, but God blesses the dwelling of the righteous. Though he scoffs at the scoffers, yet he gives grace to the afflicted. The wise will inherit honor, but fools display dishonor." And in this we have that idea that we need to live honorably. Our job is to live according to the principles of wisdom. God's going to handle those who live dishonorably. And so we leave the judgment and the consequences to him, and we take care of ourselves.
In Proverbs chapter 4, it begins with a discussion about the teaching, the instruction. And it says, "Hear, O sons, the instruction of a father, and give attention that you may gain understanding. For I give you sound teaching. Do not abandon my instruction. When I was a son to my father, tender and the only son in the sight of my mother, then he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments and live. Acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget, nor turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will guard you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is, acquire wisdom, and with all your acquiring, get understanding." And look at all those words that are synonymous with what we're talking about here, what this teaching is called. It's called instruction. It's called sound teaching. It's called wisdom. It's called understanding. It's called his instructions. And we have to put all those together to understand really what's being talked about here. It's not just a teaching, it is sound teaching. It is instruction that serves a certain purpose to teach. It is wisdom and so forth. And so that's what it's called. That passage also says that we need to do certain things with that teaching. We need to give attention to it. We need to not abandon it. We need to hold it fast, to keep it. We need to acquire it. We need to go out and seek it and bring it in. We should never forget it. We should never turn away from it. We should not forsake it. And we should love it. This is what God wanted the Israelites to do when they had a king. The instruction was that when a new king came along, he was to write out God's law, and that way it became his. And apparently they didn't do that, because toward the end they found it in the temple, and they were so surprised, look what I found. Mm-hmm. And Josiah, I think, was pretty upset when he heard that that was there. Mm-hmm. They hadn't done this. They hadn't held it fast. They had forgotten it. They turned away from it, and it's a dangerous thing to do. The positive result is if we do those things, we will gain understanding, we will live, she will guard us, and she will watch over us. The next verses, in verses 8 through 10, describe a prize that will result, and how we should prize her, and then the prize that happens. Prize her, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a garland of grace. She will present you with a crown of beauty. Hear, my son, and accept my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. So what we are to do toward this prize, is we are to prize her. We are to embrace her. We need to hear and accept what she says. If we do that, then she will exalt us. She will honor us. She will place on our head a garland of grace and present us with a crown of beauty, and the years of our life will be many. Then he shifts to talking about the walk, which is such a familiar theme throughout the Bible. Here in verses 11 through 15 of chapter 4, I have directed you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in upright paths. When you walk, your steps will not be impeded, and if you run, you will not stumble. Take hold of instruction, do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not proceed in the way of evil men. Avoid it, do not pass by it. Turn away from it and pass on. Look at all the instructions that are given about this walk. It is the way of wisdom. It involves upright paths. And if we walk in this, our steps are not impeded. There's no obstacle to stop us along the way. And we can run but not stumble, which is similar to what Isaiah had to say, but we won't go there right now. Do not enter the path of the wicked. Do not proceed in the way of evil men. Avoid it. And that's the problem in all generations, I guess, but it seems to be especially true today, that people don't go to the trouble to avoid the wrong thing. We need to avoid the wrong path and not pass by it. You don't just go near it. Let's see how close I can get to it. Don't pass by it. Just turn away. Pass on. Go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And so our walk should take us in the right way, and we should avoid the wrong way. It then gives a contrast between the upright and the not righteous, the unrighteous. Speaking of the unrighteous, it says they cannot sleep unless they do evil, and they are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the dawn of the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. Notice the contrast here between the righteous and the unrighteous. The unrighteous cannot sleep unless they're doing evil. In fact, they're robbed of sleep unless they make someone fall, someone stumble. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. Theirs is a life of darkness, and they don't even know what they're stumbling over. They stumble around, but they don't even know what it is. Contrast that with the righteous, and all you need to say is their path is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter. And that's kind of like that sweet sleep that you were talking about a while ago. Isn't that a beautiful concept, that our path is like the light of dawn and just gets brighter and brighter and brighter as we go? There is an admonition at the end of that chapter, in chapter 4 from verse 20. My son, give attention to my words, incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and health to all their whole body. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you a deceitful mouth, and put devious lips far from you. Let your eyes look directly ahead, and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the right nor to the left. Turn your foot from evil. And look at all that admonition that's given here from the Father to the Son. Give attention to these things. Incline your heart to these things. Don't let them out of your sight. And keep them in the midst of your heart. And watch over them in your heart with diligence. Get rid of a deceitful mouth and devious lips. And keep your eyes straight ahead. And let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. And watch where you're going. Don't turn to the right or the left, but do turn your feet when you come to evil. And among that passage is this admonition that the words, in this case, of course, ultimately the words of God, are life to those who find them and health to all their body. Mm-hmm. And again, that's a beautiful thought, that God's words are life to those who find them and health to all of our body.
Right. All right, Proverbs chapter 5 is another My Son set of instructions, and in this one we have really a very poetic contrast between loving the woman you're supposed to love versus loving an adulteress or a temptress. Mm-hmm. And so Proverbs chapter 5, My son, give attention to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding, that you may observe discretion and your lips may reserve knowledge. For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and smoother than oil is her speech. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps lay hold of Sheol. She does not ponder the path of her life, her ways are unstable, she does not know it. Now then, my sons, listen to me, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your vigor to others and your years to the cruel one, lest strangers be filled with your strength and your hard-earned goods go to the house of an alien. And you groan at your latter end, when your flesh and your body are consumed, and you say, How I have hated instruction, and my heart spurned reproof. And I have not listened to the voice of my teachers, nor inclined my ear to my instructors. I was almost in utter ruin in the midst of the assembly and congregation. Drink water from your own cistern, and fresh water from your own well. Should your springs be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be yours alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. As a loving hind and a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you at all times. Be exhilarated always with her love. For why should you, my son, be exhilarated with an adulteress, and embrace the bosom of a foreigner? For the ways of a man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he watches all his paths. His own iniquities will capture the wicked, and he will be held with the cords of his sin. He will die for lack of instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he will go astray. So really there, again, a very vivid imagery in chapter 5, a very poetic but still a very timely series of instructions for the son about how he should handle relationships with women as he grows older. Should he follow after an adulteress, or should he find a woman that he can love as his wife and treat her the way that he should? So we have positive admonition for the son to be satisfied with his own wife, and we have that negative admonition for the son to stay away from an adulteress. The qualities of the adulteress, just some of those: her speech is smooth, but it results in bitterness. She can't deliver what she promises. It just won't work out the way you hope it will. Her way leads to death. She does not consider the consequences of what she does. And that really, is that not just a hallmark of our society today? We don't even want to talk about consequences. And if I try to remind you of consequences for your behavior, then I'm a bad person for talking about the consequences of what you're going to suffer.
And that shows up so many times in these chapters, that concept of they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're stumbling over, they don't care,
right?
They don't consider.
And we could get, again, we're not going to take the time to get into the New Testament passages about training our conscience.
Yeah.
And what implications we have there in this passage. The results of following after the adulteress. Years and efforts are wasted, and just what a sad predicament that is, that you spend years chasing after something that promises fulfillment, but in the end yields only emptiness. And so all of those years and all of that effort chasing a fulfillment that is just never going to be realized. And in the end, it's emptiness, and there's nothing. You'll have nothing to show for it. There's a loss of resources. You'll spend money and time and energies that could have been spent doing things that were righteous, but those resources are gone forever. there will be regret. At some point, there will be regret in this life or in the next. And you'll look back at the time that was wasted, and you'll wish you could have that time back. And ultimately, there will be embarrassment. It brings embarrassment upon yourself and upon your family, upon your community, if you chase after the adulteress. By contrast, though, the one who is faithful to his own wife is approved of by the Lord, and the Lord smiles at that relationship and appreciates what that relationship means. The one who follows the adulteress will bear the consequences of his sin. And so the contrast there is stark and vivid in the imagery that is portrayed in Proverbs chapter 5.
And again, there's a real application here for a father and a son. Mm-hmm. There's a spiritual application for wisdom and folly, and following God's law and rejecting God's law.
Absolutely.
Do we have any questions this week?
As always, we've got a few questions. First, what blessings are available to those who seek wisdom? And then next, what awaits those who pursue folly?
It's an either or thing. We're going to have some consequences. Mm-hmm. We can't choose door C where you get no consequences.
And that that kind of gets to the idea of the positive and the negative that we've kind of highlighted in these chapters. There's always a positive and a negative side of these proverbs. The blessings are a positive consequence, and when we use the word consequence, we're usually talking about something negative. But you're right, there are consequences either way, either positive or negative.
And if we lay them out in black and white, is it hard to choose which one is the good one?
It's easy to choose which set of consequences I would rather have. Sometimes in our lack of foresight, we don't concentrate on the consequences. We think, boy, it sounds hard to follow wisdom sometimes. Mm-hmm. But when we put it in terms of the consequences, maybe it helps us make that choice.
Yeah.
Final question is, why should the son be satisfied with his own wife, and what awaits the son who follows after the temptress?
Good questions.
Good questions.
What are we going to do next week?
Next week, we will do chapters 6 through 9.
How many chapters is that?
That would be 4.
So how many chapters per day?
A little over a half a chapter a day. If you read about 4/5 of a chapter every day, then you should make it through in a week.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I bet they could do it.
I think you would do it.
I think they will. I think they might even be able to handle more than that.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay. Well, I'm sure they'll get that done.
Yeah.
So we look forward to that.
I can't wait.
That will be fun. As we go through the Proverbs, we mentioned before, the presentation changes from time to time.
It does.
But you can see how these early chapters are a narrative, as you said before. It's a continuing instruction.
Right.
And that won't be true of the whole book of Proverbs, but that's true so far. All righty. See you next week, Lord willing.
I'll be here.
Good. I'll be here. We'll both be here.
At the same time. Even.
At the same time, Lord willing. If not, we'll do what Michael does and green screen.
That might be fun.
Yeah.
You have some graphics in the back.
Yeah, I have some graphics back there, and you're in one place and I'm in another place.
Like yeah.
And we have resisted the temptation to switch seats in the middle of reading the passage just to confuse them a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're just trying to keep it on the straight and narrow.
Right.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next week.
See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.